What's going on?
It's Chong Li, the current champ.
He's never been defeated. Holds all sorts of records, including the fastest KO. He killed a guy during the last Kumite.
Yep, kicked the poor bastard right in the throat.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical, and it's that time of the week. It's time for your top 5 list, and today we're going to talk X-Men controversies, and I can't think of anyone better to talk about that than our resident X-Men historian, our Marvel aficionado. Doc, how you doing?
I am great. I love this topic already because there's so many cool X-Men controversies throughout the years.
The comic industry, as we're all learning, is a controversial subject. They're always doing weird stuff, and if you go back in the annals of history of comic books, there's been a lot of dirty deeds done to people, and Marvel Comics, X-Men is no different. What's your number 5 controversy for X-Men?
John Byrne quits in 1991, 1992, and Scott Lobdell becomes basically the default writer because he was walking down the hall at the time. I mean, I'm not kidding. He was walking down the hall. They had nobody else to do it. They had like 2 or 3 days to get a script done before the book had to go to publish, and he got the job and ended up as a longtime X-Men scribe as a result.
Well, that was pretty fortuitous because he's actually a good writer, or at least a good X-Men writer.
Well, he was just a comedian at that point because he was doing stand-up, and he wasn't even really in comics at that point. He got the job just because he happened to be walking down the hall at the time, and an X-Men editor, I don't remember which one, saw him there and was like, "Scott, we need you to write. Can you write this script for us?" And he's like, "Okay, I got like." They're like, "You got 3 days." He's like, "Okay, fine."
So, what did they do to Byrne to make him quit? Is he just had enough?
John Byrne's a temperamental dude, and basically they brought him back on in around the X-Men relaunch when they split it up and added the second book. He was writing Uncanny X-Men while Claremont was writing X-Men, and then Claremont quits and they gave Byrne the job of writing X-Men 2, and I guess he didn't like how much editorial interference he was getting, so he just said, F this, I quit.
All right, so that's a pretty good start. What's the number 4 X-Men controversy?
It's another surprise quitting, and that would be when Grant Morrison, he was almost done with his new X-Men run, and he surprised Quesada at, I think it was New York Comic Con, by announcing his going exclusive with DC. He never informed Marvel that he was leaving. He didn't inform them. They thought that they were in the process of negotiating for him to re-up his exclusive with Marvel, and he announced his DC exclusive, and they actually got into a screaming match in the middle of the floor of whatever convention it was, when Quesada confronted him about it, because he thought that they were friends too. And nope, Morrison was just like, "No, I'm done." It's one of the reasons why, and the thing is, you saw it happen immediately with how much they retconned away the end of Morrison's run on X-Men almost immediately. It was basically spite retconning. They immediately got rid of they immediately brought Magneto back after he had ostensibly died in New X-Men 150, and the only thing that they left alone was Jean being dead. And even that they started playing with almost immediately whenever they did like Phoenix End Song and Phoenix War Song. Yeah, they almost immediately started retconning away everything that Morrison did on X-Men.
Well, I would say quitting your job and announcing your exclusive deal for the competition at a Comic-Con is controversial. That's pretty great.
Oh,
What's number 3?
Number 3 is the de-emphasizing of the X-Men because of out of spite. It's more spite. Spite seems to be kind of the constant on this list. Because of the deal with Fox. Because Fox had the exclusive, had the film rights on X-Men. Ike kind of put a mandate down from on high that no non-Marvel Studios, properties could be emphasized in comics. They would, and in fact, to the point where he said the Inhumans are basically like the X-Men. Fans will accept it. And yeah, I mean, we can all look back at history and see that no, they did not.
It's not how it works.
No. People like what they like, and they can't be forced to like things that they don't like. But Ike thought that because, while they're both kind of weird, they're both, their own species. They're both kind of hated and feared. Inhumans can totally replace the X-Men. And yeah, we all saw that. No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's like cutting your nose to spite your face. Like, oh, let's not have any kick-ass X-Men comics because we foolishly sold away the movie rights. Well, wait, that's one of our 3 or 4 most important IPs that generate sales. Yeah,
and they thought that they could actually replicate X-Men sales with the Inhumans, and X-Men is even, what is it, 3 years after they've kind of abandoned this idea, and X-Men sales still haven't recovered. We had like 2 or 3 Inhumans books for a while, and none of it got the fans on board. They don't like what they don't like, and they do like what they do like. So make things that they like and stop making things they don't.
Well, at least we got the ABC Inhuman series out of it, because that was an instant classic.
Oh yeah, that was television gold. I mean, we are truly living in a golden age of television.
Oh yeah, that was some of the effects on that TV show were trash. But this is a comic book channel. We're here to talk some comic book news. What's the number 2 X-Men controversy, Doc?
This one was hard. It was hard to decide between 1 and 2, but I picked number 2 as the Image 7 walkout. Because that hit the X office more than any other office. Yeah, Todd and Eric were still in the Spider office, but Portacio, Lee, and Liefeld were selling millions, hundreds of thousands of copies of every single issue of X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and X-Force, and having them all just literally walk out. That's God. It was a disaster. They've never recovered. I mean, to this day, there's a reason why Marvel plays musical chairs with their artists on books, because they're so terrified of this happening again with one artist becoming super popular from building a run on a book that becomes iconic, that they just freaked out, and they won't emphasize artists at all. I mean, they pretend to, but they won't let any of them stick around because of how bad. I mean, walking into your office and saying, yeah, all of us, we all quit. And then walking across the street to DC and saying, yeah, by the way, I know you guys heard that we just quit. We're not coming and working for you. That killed the X-Men. I mean, okay, they had the Kuberts for a while. They've had some other good X artists that have come through since those days, but they're still terrified of it. They'll never let anybody build an audience, and it hurts X-Men as a result.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like long runs with the same artist, and long runs with the same creative team, artists that kind of slowly kind of work their way in, run for a while, a couple of years, and then go over to another X property and bump the sales up on that one. That's something that used to be done all the time, but they realize that it's terrifying for their, if those guys leave, they're screwed.
It's also interesting, that doesn't even mention Mark Silvestri, who's one of the best Wolverine artists of all time as well.
Yeah, what the hell am I thinking? Silvestri too. Yeah, 4 of the Image 7 were ex-office guys. So Silvestri, Liefeld, Lee, and Portacio all walking out. That's basically your top 4 out of 5, titles that they had at the time, because ASM had kind of fallen off a little bit and been replaced by the adjectiveless Spider-Man book. But yeah, oh god, yeah. That's Wolverine and Spider-Man were basically their 2 highest selling solo heroes, and you basically lost the farm on that one.
So I can't imagine that's a coup de grace. That's a finishing blow that'll put you that puts a publisher on their knees for a few years. They try to recuperate. What could actually eclipse those 7 artists walking out at once, basically destroying the X-Men office as far as artists goes? What's number 1, Doc?
Chris Claremont actually got forced out of the X office. He had been writing X-Men for 17 years. He took it from being a Z-list canceled book that nobody was buying. Yeah, okay, Len Wein wrote giant-sized X-Men and kind of got it started, but Claremont took a Z-list book and made it into the number 1 book on the planet for a decade plus, almost 2 straight decades. And he got actually forced out. He got forced out of it on Uncanny X-Men, and then forced out on X-Men because Jim Lee, while they were friends, Chris and Jim wanted to kind of rehash a lot of the, the stuff that he liked growing up with, the Shi'ar and the Phoenix and all the cosmic stuff. And, he wanted to rehash a lot of that stuff. And Claremont's like, no, I already did all this stuff. I want to keep going forward. And that's when that was when X-Men started. So basically it came down to who was going to be directing the ship. And Chris wasn't going to be just a scripter. He wanted to have a lot of control on the direction of the X franchise, and so did Jim Lee. And they wanted to go in different directions. And the X office editors picked Jim for where it was going. And the reason why this became the number 1 instead of the number 2 is because you add it to compound it with number 2. With less than a year later, all of those guys that you hitched your wagon to quit.
So basically, they sold their life, a lifer at Marvel who basically took a struggling nothing franchise and made it the biggest comic book in the world, and then they sold him down the river for the new talent, and then they got their asses burned over it.
Yep, exactly. And that there's the irony in it.
It's sweet justice.
The justice, but the people that got hurt the most out of all of it were the fans.
Absolutely.
Because Chris could have kept going on that book for years, on X-Men or Uncanny X-Men or both. And that's the thing, Chris, while Chris is all right with, a one issue book, he doesn't really get his groove until about 10 or 15 issues into a run. Chris is a long form storyteller, and, modern comics are not designed for him, where you stick him on a one shot and expect that, it'll be good, but it won't be great. He needs to get into a groove.
It's like handing Picasso finger paints.
Yeah, exactly. And
Pathetic.
Eventually he'll figure out how to do it, but it's going to take a little while. So,
all right, Doc. I had a lot of fun running down the X-Men controversies over the years. A lot of great information. I learned a lot of stuff. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate it, buddy.
Oh, anytime. I love doing these things.
All right, later.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.